they do help this event happen. All right. That being said, now that we're all back and full of food and ready to go, I'm going to introduce Leon.
Thank you. All right, before I start the actual talk, I want to thank all of the organizers of Monitorama. Like a lot of you, I am a first-timer here. This is my first time being part of it, and it's been a dream of mine for 5 or 6 years to have a chance just to be part of this, and being invited on the stage to share some of my ideas is just, I'm just incredibly grateful. So,
sorry, the mic. Yes.
Oh, over here. Here we go. So again, thank you to everyone who also keeps me in front of the mic. All right, so I want to start with a story. And like all good stories, you have to start with once upon a time. But this is a true story. In 2001, as part of an effort to build a global monitoring solution for Nestle, they agreed to move my family to Switzerland. And that's what we did, which was really lucky for me. We were in the French-speaking part of the country. And that was good because I'd grown up speaking French with my grandmother, and I took French in high school. It was less lucky for my wife, who was born in Spain and has 2 brothers adopted from Colombia, and had exactly 2 weeks of Berlitz French before we landed in country. I didn't realize exactly how unlucky it was going to be, though, until a couple of weeks after we got there, she wanted to meet me for lunch. And so she's driving out, and I get a call from the car, and she said, I think I missed the exit. What was it called again? And I said, it's, well, where we go? There we go. Okay. It's Sheb. Oh, okay, it's easy, right? She misses the exit 2 more times. And it isn't until the 3rd call, where she's getting progressively more frustrated about the situation, that it finally dawned on me what had happened. Now, before I tell you about that, I want to point out that all languages have rules and exceptions. Now, Spanish has rules and exceptions. French has rules and exceptions. And it hadn't dawned on me until that moment that my Spanish-speaking wife might not be working under the right context to see a sign that I said was Sheb that looked like that. C-H-E-X-B-R-E-S, Chebre. Just like it sounds, right? It was in that moment that I really learned a lot about technical empathy. I learned an important lesson about putting myself literally in the driver's seat as the user, and if I didn't do that, it was going to lead to some really bad design decisions as well as a really uncomfortable lunch with my wife. So I want to sort of talk about that. Before I dive into it, though, my name is Leon Adato. I am a middle-aged white man on a stage giving a conference talk. This picture should inspire confidence that I know what the hell I'm talking about. More important than that is that this is an Oyster talk. I have the parenting educator, Barbara Colaroso, to thank for that idea. What I mean by that is that in 30 minutes, I really can't do a lot to teach you much. In fact, in that amount of time, all I can do is irritate you. Now, an oyster, when it becomes irritated, does one of 2 things. It creates a pearl, or it dies. Now, it is my desperate hope that I don't irritate you to death, but the choice does remain yours if you choose that. However, what I hope is that I give you just the grain of an idea that you will then begin to think about and mull over and layer with your own ideas until you have something that is polished and personal and unique and valuable. So that's my hope. I discovered that day in Switzerland that no matter how simple the interface seems to the developer, if regular folks can't use it, they can't navigate it, you have a problem. And that lesson counts whether you're talking about something as simple as an elevator, I don't know which button to push to get where I'm going, or operating systems. Yes, this is an operating system. It's Microsoft Bob, right? Some of you remember that. It lasted 35 seconds. It was a nightmare. It's also bad for things like cars. This is the 1972 Maserati Boomerang. It is utterly undrivable. Or the roads you drive those cars on. Anyone from San Francisco? This is the 101 turning onto Van Ness, right? Or furniture. I don't know. There was a design meeting where a designer said, I know this is going to solve all of our users' problems. This is what they want. I can't even with this. But mostly it was operating systems. This is also from Microsoft Bob. And the thing that amazes me about this is that this predates Clippy by a lot, and yet they still created Clippy. Okay, the point isn't that these things are ugly. They are. Or that they're unusable, whatever. But an engineer really thought they addressed a problem a user was actually having. And that's not, it leaves users frustrated or confused or horrified. Now, the problem with talking about empathy is that it gets a bad rap as being really touchy-feely. It offends our IT practitioner Vulcan sensibilities. And, you know, the dictionary definition doesn't do anything to really help us about that. In truth, empathy is different than sympathy. See, sympathy is feeling the same thing someone else is feeling and agreeing with that feeling, whereas empathy is the ability to see things from another person's point of view. A person may feel sympathy, but they share empathy. And that's what I'm talking about today. In tech, however, sometimes we get both sympathy and empathy spectacularly wrong. We ask feeling questions about completely technical decisions that have nothing to do with feelings, or we clumsily try to apply empathy and end up sounding awkward or worse, right? And yes, I've heard these things in actual meetings from actual other humans. Anyway, technical empathy, when I say that, what I mean is the ability to see a proposed technical choice from someone else's perspective in order to identify gaps that are in the user experience or the flow or the result. That's what we're trying to do. So let's get to it. I want to start with accessibility because that's what we all should literally be doing every day. You should be starting with accessibility. It should be the first part of our design choices. I will accept a close second to security, but that's it. Really, it's not an afterthought. It's not supposed to be something that we tack on at the end. Accessibility is the first thing that we do. And what I mean by that, I have a few ideas here. Now, I'm not going to belabor the point of accessibility because it is an entire 3-day talk in and of itself. I'm not an expert, and I only have 30 minutes. However, at the bare minimum, everything that is on a screen should be able to be communicated by a screen reader. Every image needs to have alt text associated with it. Every video needs to have closed captions. Everything that uses a color to indicate state needs to have a colorblind equivalent. And to the best of your ability and the limit of your budget, you need to use language localization within your application. That is the bare minimum. That isn't good enough. That's the least you can do. And I'll tell you that if your sphincter is clenching up right now thinking about how hard that's going to be or how much pushback you're going to get, then that's the problem you need to solve. Not the accessibility part, that. And if you're also thinking that you're going to go back to the office and somebody there is going to say, well, I don't know, there's just not enough demand. Fuck you, there is. Those are the numbers. I'm not going to read them all off to you. But there's a lot, okay? And more than that is that every one of us is going to experience one or more disabilities within our lifetime. To design something assuming that disability doesn't exist is the height of hubris. 15% of the world operates with disabilities. Not only that, the last bullet point actually is a nice counterpoint, right? That 1.35 billion people speak English. Only 1.35 billion people speak English. The other part of the 7 million on the planet speak something else, and only 360 million speak English as their first language. So if your application only works in English, you are leaving out a huge population of potential users. So just something to think about. And really what we're getting to here is the next part, which is assumptions. Now, it is one thing to assume that the people using my accounting software know how to do accounting. Like that's safe, that's fair. It's another thing to assume that the person using my accounting software sees the way I do, processes information the way I do, or speaks the language that I do. That's just not okay. That's not an okay assumption to make. But there's more than that. We are human. We have a lot of cognitive biases. We do a lot of these, and we do them a lot. So we need to become, familiar with these. Hat tip to yourbias.is, in case you want this poster. I have it hanging in my office also as a reminder. But second of all, we are developers and coders and IT practitioners, people who create solutions. And so we have a whole host of other biases that just go beyond all of these. If you Google falsehoods programmers believe, you could spend a good solid 2 or 3 days in the Google hole trying to just get through all of them. For example, we make assumptions about names. The null family and the test family exist. There are thousands of them. They exist to do nothing more than bork your database all the time. I don't know which part Peter Vandermeer is going to put in the middle name part, but it's not his middle name. And that last line, that's my name. And the best part of it is the part on the left is my last name. So I'm not exactly sure what you want out of me. If you have a field, if a form field that asks for first name and last name, what do I do there, right? As developers, we make assumptions about names that are simply patently not true across the bulk of the world. We make assumptions about time. My favorite is the first one. In Samoa 2011, Thursday the 29th was followed immediately by Saturday the 31st. There was no 30th. It didn't happen. All right? But on top of that, ask your Unix system administrator about leap seconds. They're delightful. This is why he drinks. It's really. So we make assumptions that time follows in an orderly manner. It does not. And of course, the whole international time zone, like who is drunk enough to draw that? What did they, I don't know. We make assumptions about addresses should be easy, right? Like I just want to deliver a package. No, your mail carrier drinks a lot, and this is why. Because there are buildings that have negative numbers. Can your system handle that? I know I personally as a human can't handle that. Also, apartment 1 is in the same building as apartment 001. They're on different floors. And there are parts of the world where that last address, that is the town of Gondal. Right? Like, okay. But also, if that's where I live, I don't know how to fill out your form. I don't know what to do so that the package gets to me. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond tech. If I know it, and I'm not smart, it must be simple and everyone must know it. How many of you have made that assumption before? Right? We all do that, and that is patently not true, which leads to the one lower down on the list, which is that everybody understands our personal company jargon, or the terms we use for things, or the industry standard words we use in a completely different way, like observability, or whatever, or monitoring, or whatever you're doing, right? So it's not that simple. That we can learn everything we need to know simply by looking at the data. We don't need to talk to those users. No. So we make these kinds of assumptions, and these are actually more pernicious than the technical ones. The technical ones we can solve using libraries or whatever, but this stuff, if you're operating under these, you've got a major problem, and that's my point, is that you cannot address an assumption if you don't know you're making it. So we need to sit down and really think about what our biases are, what our assumptions are, so that we can then learn to get past them. So how do you get past them? Well, it really has to do with asking questions. Nobel Prize-winning physicist Isidore Isaac Rabi said, "My mother made me a scientist." You see, at the time in the 1950s, every other Jewish mother in Brooklyn would say, "So, no, did you learn anything today?" But not my mother. No. She'd say, "Izzy, did you ask a good question today?" And that difference, asking good questions, is what made me a scientist. And we need to be scientists. We need to be good scientists. We need to ask good questions, the right questions. We need to be comfortable asking the questions at all of the people who can answer them. Now, disclaimer, a lot of what I'm about to share with you is not only my own discoveries. I have been privileged to work with some incredible UX researchers and designers throughout my years, and so I asked them for their insights, and this is some stuff that they shared with me. And so I just want to pass it along to you. For example, they shared with me how to run a UX call in and of itself, and that stuff is really small. It's an eye exam, and I did that on purpose because the only one that actually matters is the one in the middle there. You know nothing. I don't care if you wrote every line of code. I don't care if you custom crafted the database with a magnet personally engraving the bits onto the platter. Like, it doesn't matter. You know nothing. You are not the expert because you're not the user. That's the only person who knows anything about how your application should work. And that's a hard thing for us to get over. So when you're running a call, how do you do that? Well, the first thing is to understand the concept of a Johari window and recognize that a lot of us spend a lot of our time validating the upper left corner. Is what I think true, true? And because we spend our time doing that, we end up asking the wrong questions or asking the right questions in the wrong way, when we should be asking in a way that helps drive down to the lower right side. Right? We want to know the things that we don't know we don't know. Sort of like the unknown unknowns in observability, but it's for design. If everything that you discover fits in the upper left quadrant, you're asking the wrong questions. So how do you do that? So technical empathy means giving the user space to express their experience, not to validate yours. And this is really interesting. I mean, when you look at the questions on the left side of the screen, they're not bad, right? Is that helpful? Like, what's wrong with is that helpful? You're boxing the user into saying yes or no and then having to defend it, and people don't want to do that. So, but asking, how do you use that today has no emotional weight to it. They don't feel like they owe you a particular kind of answer when you ask them that way. How is that working for you today? Now, they could say, like shit. Okay, but they probably won't. They'll probably say, well, but you're going to discover some stuff that you probably didn't know. How do you feel about what you just did? Okay, that's a feely question, right? But in the context of saying, I'd like you to go through and do X and Y and Z, now how did you feel about that? Well, it was really difficult. It didn't feel smooth. It didn't feel natural. Why? Tell me more about that. But the last line is my favorite. And I've done a lot of UX sessions over the years, and you're sitting there looking at a wireframe, right? And you get to a point where you say, okay, so that button over there, honestly, I have no idea what that's supposed to do. And there's a pause, and you know it's coming. Well, what do you think it should do? How do you think it ought to work? And now we're off to the races. If you get somebody on a call who says, I have no idea what it's going to do, and then you ask them, you give them permission to tell you what it should do, that's gold, right there. As devs, as developers and IT practitioners and people who create solutions in general, we tend to focus on the how. And that's fine. I mean, that is our job. How am I going to make this work? How am I going to solve this problem? How am I going to create something that scales? All of those. The problem is that we tend to rope the user into the how. Well, how would you like me to do that? That's not their problem. Instead, we should be asking questions that allow them a chance to give us the what they want to do, but more importantly, why do they want to do it? Why do they think this is something that needs to be done? That's, again, where the valuable information is. UX sessions are best when they uncover how users do their work. Understand the nuance there. Not how they use your tool, how they do their work. And if you're lucky, they will also describe why they do or don't use your solution to do their work. That's really what a UX session is there for, is to find out the work they're doing, because then you can create a solution that helps them do their work. Okay, one other thing, separate from asking questions and stuff like that. If you do not have a place like this, I don't care if it's in the application or the tool or the whatever, or if it's in a forum or a website that's separate, I don't care. But if you do not have a place where people can go and place a request, I want your solution to do X, Y, Z. They can go in anonymously and do it, or they can go in signed up and do it. And also, other users can come by and see that request and then upvote it or downvote it or comment on it. Yes, I 100% agree it should do this thing, but also it needs to show the information in this way, or I need this other information also. If you do not have something like that, then you are missing a rich source of valuable insight. And then once you have something like this, your developers need to go in, and every time they're going to work on something else, they have to justify why they did not pick the item that's been open since 2012 and has 967 upvotes to it. Just tell me why you're not doing that one. There might be a good reason. I'm not saying that you have to be a slave to the feature request list, but I'm saying that developers need to make a conscious choice why they wouldn't do what the users are actually asking us to do. Why would you not satisfy that? So please, if you don't have one of these, figure out how you're going to build one of them. Okay, so mostly unnecessary summary. One of the UX researchers that I know, Joseph Breitreiter, said to me just the other day, he said, I'm constantly correcting engineers who say, we have to do it like this because users are stupid. Okay, users are not stupid. They really don't care about your application. As it says there, it is UI number 37 in the list of UIs they deal with on a daily basis. They just want to be able to get in, get their job done, and get out. And if you make it hard, they won't get in and do their job. They'll find somewhere else to do it. They are working in a situation of high cognitive load. They're solving their own problems. They're doing their job. And that takes up 95% of their brain power. You get 5% of their brain whether you like it or not. And if you make it too hard, you won't get any percent. So really what it comes down to is getting out of the user's way so they can do what they want to do, because like us, they are tired and they want to go home and they just want to do the thing they're there to do. That's what technical empathy is all about. And again, you have to assume that the user is the expert in what the user needs to do, and that we know absolutely nothing. And the only time we break that assumption is in the case when it will build a rapport that invites the user to give us more information and more insight into what it is that they are trying to accomplish. Thank you so very much for taking the time with me today. I am ready for your questions. I got some extra time, so really, let me have it. Yeah?
So what would you say is the most important? Like you said, there's all sorts of features that could be done. If you want to take an application that's not following these concepts of making things a lot better, what would you say is the most valuable thing to start with?
Okay, so to repeat, just in case the sound isn't traveling, what do I think is the most important place to start? If you have an application where this stuff is all not happening, what's the most important thing? So again, I think accessibility has to be the first thing. First of all, you'll discover a crap ton about your application just by trying to make it accessible and finding out why it can't be or what's in the way. But second of all, if you're not having these user conversations, if you're not able to have these conversations with users, if there's no mechanism by which to interact with users, that is a huge discovery. It is an anti-pattern, obviously. And that's the next thing. Once you do those two things, once you start those two projects, probably everything else is going to sort of domino its way along. You know, you will have that communication channel with users. And you'll have, then you can tweak and tune, and I mean, it's IT, it's iterative, right? We'll make mistakes, we'll learn from the mistakes, we'll go back and we'll do it better the next time. Any other questions? Okay. Well then, thank you very much. Thank you again.
I wasn't keeping track, but if it wasn't the first F-bomb, it was definitely the most passionate, so it was quite good. Awesome. Thanks again.
No problem. Do you want me to